Hello. We have discussed many aspects of power in organizations, of power in organizational settings. I hope that the previous lectures were of great use to you. I hope that you have learned a lot and you uh, were able to start using this knowledge in your careers with great success to help you improve your careers and to help you grow and develop your careers the way you want them to be developed. And today we are talking about another very important aspect of power in organization. First, let me increase the volume because I think it is not high enough. Well, I guess that's good. Okay. So let me share my screen. So this is what we will be talking about today. Power and viewing others as objects. And the subtitle is Important Knowledge for Your Career Success. And this knowledge is really very important. So please stay tuned. How do people usually treat things? Well, people generally treat things with a combination of, routine, practicality, and sometimes neglect, often with lack of mindful appreciation and failing to notice details about them, right? We all do this. Well, in general, people approach things on the basis of their usefulness, and it makes sense. For example, when people are trying to reach a goal, useful, goal-relevant things are generally viewed as more positively, and less useful, goal-irrelevant things are viewed not as positive. And furthermore, the same things are generally evaluated more positively when they are more useful than when they are less useful. In other words, things are more liked when they're instrumental, useful in reaching a goal, than when they're not. See, this is really obvious things. This is how we use billions of things around us. Why are we talking about this? Because the question is, what about human beings? Can we say that the same psychological processes apply to people? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes. Let's take a look at a few quotes that a group of researchers presented in one of their research. This is what people were saying. In the beginning, I would befriend people just to know what was going on in the company, not really being genuinely interested in other people. Now things have shifted. I am a senior manager now, so people treat me this way. There are certainly people in my organization who I only interact with when I need them to help with a task. The guy who takes care of our phone system is a good example. Just today, I needed him to correct someone's phone system. Beyond that, I can't remember the last time I spoke to him. Another person is saying, I used people to perform tasks and then took credit for the larger goal it served when it was accomplished. I never really did anything to acknowledge their contributions. Some of my coworkers only interact with me when they need something from me. or when they need my help accomplishing a task. They don't express interest in anything about me as a person in most contexts, and will only do so if they require my assistance. I feel that otherwise they wouldn't care to interact with me and don't spare me much thought either way. Here is what another person is saying. There are a few relationships I have pursued at work solely because I needed someone in a certain group who can do things for me. I befriended some staff members in a different department specifically so that I could ask them for occasional favors. I have to demonstrate that I am making an effort to connect, despite not actually wanting to collaborate much with them. That is what an IT person is saying. I work in IT, and I am pretty much mostly needed when things go wrong. There are management members here that basically treat me as a tool to get their needs met and don't care what my workload is or how busy I am and if I am in the middle of helping someone else. I have a goal and I do not care how me reaching that goal affects others around. This is what another person was saying. See, all these quotes, although expressed by different people, they, in a sense, are similar. Why? Because they are they're describing how people are viewed, well, you can say, as objects. Yes, unfortunately, human beings can also be viewed as objects. Your boss may seem to be a wonderful person originally. However, there are significant chances that your boss uses this approach in treating subordinates. So don't be fooled by seeming niceness. Be a smart person. Be well prepared. Analyze things. Analyze your environment. Analyze what's going on in your department, in your company, with your peers, with your coworkers, with your boss. Please pay attention to this lecture. It will really help you. So when we are saying that a person is viewed as an object, in reality, there is even a scientific name for this, and this is called objectification. So viewing other human beings as objects in research, in science, is called objectification. So what is objectification? People like objects are treated as means to an end, as tools to reach someone else's goals. Objectification is approaching useful people, and useful meaning in terms of the goals of an individual A, regardless of the value of other human qualities of these people. Approach toward another person which is driven by the person's usefulness for the individual A's personal goals. Treating another person as a tool for reaching someone else's goals without consideration of harm this may cause for this person. We have used the word useful here. At the same time, please pay attention that useful people are not always objectified. Useful people are not necessarily always objectified. If a person A actually cares about, state and well-being of someone whom he or she finds useful, this is not classical objectification. This is instrumentality, a component of classical objectification, and in reality, this instrumentality may be even healthy. So instrumentality, as I've said, is a component on a continuum. Here we have this continuum. Instrumentality, for example, from 1 to 10, and when instrumentality reaches, its maximum, then it turns to objectification. So once again, useful, when a person is viewed as useful, it is not necessarily bad. Instrumentality may be healthy. For example, providing instrumental support can, even strengthen healthy bonds between individuals. For example, a coworker has respectfully approached you for help because of your unique knowledge in some area. So this coworker knows that you have this knowledge and finds you useful in these terms to help him or her with this matter. And so this person talks to you, approaches you. So please, once again, pay attention that instrumentality is not classical objectification. Even consider your friends. Consider your friends as instrumental or non-instrumental for some goal you have. Having this particular goal increases the chances that you will contact those friends who seem to be useful, instrumental in terms of helping you with this particular goal. You will not contact those friends who are not instrumental in terms of helping you deal with this specific goal, because you need to address this issue. So you think about friends who can help you with it, and so you contact them. So there is potential functionality of perceiving others in terms of their usefulness. So to the extent people care about the subjective states of others, such relationships include instrumentality, but not objectification. And this may be absolutely fine. For example, networking is to a great degree based on this approach. So when does instrumentality turn into objectification? To viewing a person as an object. Objectification is overlooking someone else's personhood, reducing someone to an object as a means to an end, as a tool for someone to reach his or her goals without considering of this person's needs and without paying attention to other qualities of this individual. Instrumentality becomes objectification when the needs, interests, emotions, well-being of another person is subordinated to the individual A. When one person uses another solely for their own benefit, without regard for the other person's welfare. Let me give you a quick example. A supervisor has loaded with his or her subordinate with a huge amount of work, so that the supervisor would look good for his or her boss. The fact that the subordinate will need to work non-stop for 24 hours without sleep and not being able to do, the long planned activities is of absolutely no interest to the boss. And there is no even really urgency to for him or her to have this request. So yeah, this is objectification. The personhood, the needs of another person are simply neglected, and the person is used as a tool for another one to meet his or her needs. In this case, professional needs. What is interesting is that instrumentality usually does not reach the level of classical objectification when the power level of everyone involved is similar. See, a broad range of social psychological work shows people do not overlook others' personhood if they have compatible goals. Groups with similar power status are perceived as allies. Allies are useful, but are not objectified because they grant each other autonomy and agency in order to meet the goals of all parties, and all of them know this about each other. They know that their level of power, of status are equal, and they treat each other's adequately. The higher is the level of social power of an individual, the higher is the level of objectification that this individual uses toward other people. See, power heightens the tendency to approach other people as though they were objects, based on how useful they are. This all sounds really strange. Actually, there is a theoretical explanation of objectification, or the reason why it exists. In our previous lectures, we talked about the approach inhibition theory of power. It was developed by Professor Keltner and his colleagues in 2003 and has been a very powerful and widely used theory of power. So this theory says that possession of social power activates approach, actively doing something, actively achieving goals, tendencies, and leads to a focus on rewards and opportunities. Possession of social power activates movements toward those people that would satisfy the need of active goal achievement of a powerful individual, regardless of other qualities of such people. Those with social power exhibit more goal-directed behavior than those with less power, including a stronger link between goals and observable behavior, and greater action in pursuit of goals. See, goal pursuit has been shown to automatically activate evaluations of other people in terms of their usefulness. And since individuals with power are very much focused on pursuing their goals, are very much focused on rewards and opportunities in their environment, in what's going on around. And so them actively pursuing their goals automatically activate evaluation of other people in terms of their usefulness for them. See, the experience of power itself leads to the objectification of social targets. A person with power and evaluation of others. Let's say a few words about this. Goal-directed behavior characterizes the social relationships of the powerful. Power directs attention toward those features of another person that are most relevant to the goals of the powerful individual. This means that a powerful person subjectively evaluates a goal-relevant person, employee, for example, more positively than a person who doesn't seem to be able to help the powerful reach his or her goals. It's very important. Although the goal-relevant employee may have worse organizational valuable qualities, The fact that he or she is useful for the powerful person makes this individual more attractive and more liked by the powerful individual, which often happens at a great cost to the organization itself. See, power, to the extent that it increases actions toward a goal of the powerful individual, also creates, positive appraisals of objects which are useful, instrumental in reaching the goal, including other people. Power heightens, increases avoidance of those people that are viewed as less useful or who may cause even slowing down of the goal completion. High power individuals are more sensitive to other people's instrumentality than lower level individuals. Specifically, those with power show greater liking for, attraction to, positive evaluation of, and preference for instrumental, useful people relative to those with less power. Let me give an example. Chief HR officer for a region in a global company wants to quickly solve a complicated issue in one of her subsidiary countries. HR manager in this subsidiary objects the idea of the chief HR, explaining that it will negatively affect the entire subsidiary. Chief HR gets angry at the local HR manager, accusing him of needlessly complicating the issue, and distances from him. See, from the viewpoint of the chief HR, the country HR manager complicates the issue and slows down the completion of the goal for chief HR to solve the issue and forget about it. The HR manager in the country does not want this issue to be solved in a wrong way. So HR in the country actually insists on more attention to be paid to the situation, on the situation to be solved in a different manner, which will take more time, more analysis. Chief HR doesn't want this, wants to finish everything quickly and forget about it, and of course dislikes or starts disliking or develops some negative feelings towards the country HR and distances from him. See, we can view instrumentality to objectification continuum. Even if a powerful person usually tends to treat a subordinate in terms of instrumentality, as soon as there is a threat for this powerful person, he or she will turn to objectification of the subordinate, simply to help himself or herself solve their problem. So once again, the powerful person may generally utilize instrumentality in how he or she deals with subordinates, but as soon as there is some threat to this powerful person, very quickly this person will turn to objectification of subordinates. Please pay attention to this. What is instrumental behavior? Engaging only with those people who facilitate completion of the person's personal goal. With the presence of power, the criteria for approaching and engaging with another person can shift from an emphasis on another person's human attributes that tend to predict, desire for a relationship independent from the person's AS goals. For example, attractive human qualities, beauty, similarity, and so on, to an emphasis on this person's usefulness, which varies as a function of the goal of the main individual. So we would think that a person will want to, engage with or approach another person based on qualities of this another person. As I've said, it may be attractive human qualities, beauty, similarity, or anything else. But individuals with power actually use the usefulness of this person as number one criterion. In the absence of power, people typically base liking for and attraction toward other people on different criteria, which characterizes humans, as from the perspective of their human qualities, character qualities, for example, similarity, beauty, intelligence, and attractiveness, and so on. People tend to think of these qualities as appealing, or good by themselves, independent from someone's personal goals. As an individual A gains power, however, his or her attitude actually turns toward establishing relationships with someone based on increasingly this person's instrumentality or usefulness for the person's aim. Thus, although it is sensible to see both instrumentality and other positive features driving desire to establish relationships with other people, regardless of the person's power, instrumentality, as a criterion for approaching other individuals, actually gains emphasis as individual A gains power. So we can summarize that focus on instrumentality as a criterion for approaching other people actually gains emphasis as perceivers gain power. Let's talk about objectification at work. Features of objectification exist in both work and non-work contexts. However, people tend to objectify others more when they are in work context. Occupying high power positions, for example, bosses, predisposes people to objectify the social relationships with their subordinates, who are perceived in instrumental terms and approached on the basis of their perceived utility. Objectification is more prevalent at work because people engage in more calculative and strategic thinking, making decisions by computing the costs and benefits. People are more likely to objectify their peers, perceiving and treating them more like objects, for example, means to obtain profit, and less like humans, for example, people who have agency and emotions in work contexts than in a comparable non-work context. Objectification is more prevalent in certain workplace organizations than in others, particularly those that elicit more calculative and strategic mindset, and explicate the consequences when people see and experience objectification at work. Whether people construe a situation as work-related or not has implications for the way they behave in that situation. See, people behave more competitively when they believe they are in a business environment than when they believe they're not. And reminders of work, for example, money, contribute powerfully to this issue. Within interpersonal exchanges, the salience of money is a first important antecedent of objectification. Priming money increases self-gain acts and boosts a mindset focused on goal achievement. See, people apply a different mindset when they believe that they are in a work context than in a non-work context. What is a mindset? Mindsets reflect people's fundamental assumptions about the world. Helping people make sense on how they should behave in the situation they are in. One relevant mindset that people tend to use more in work context is calculative and strategic thinking, whereby people make judgments and decisions by computing the costs and benefits of the available option. Let me describe a very interesting experiment for you. A group of researchers conducted the following experiment. This is how they described it in their work. We manipulated the background of several photographs of multiple individuals to make it appear as though they were in a work or non-work context. Then we asked participants in the experiment to imagine interaction with a target person in the depicted context. We predicted that people would objectify the target individual more when they imagined interaction with the person with the target in a work versus a non-work context, and that this effect would be mediated by calculative and strategic thinking. And here is an example of a photograph that participants in this experiment saw. As the description explains here, participants in the experiment saw many pictures similar to what we see here now. So here we see this young lady in a kind of home context, and here she is obviously in a work context. So participants in the experiment looked at many sets of such pictures, and they needed to evaluate each person on these pictures with the help of the following questions. This person could be instrumental for accomplishing things. This person can be a tool to help me get things done. This person could be disposable once she is no longer useful. If I were in this kind of environment, I would behave calculatively and strategically. And people answered these questions on the continuum strongly agree to strongly disagree. So once again, for example, they were looking at these two pictures and evaluating this lady using these pictures. What are these questions? What are the results of the experiment? Well, non-surprisingly, there is evidence that people view targets in a more utilitarian and objectifying way when those targets are situated in a work versus non-work context, because work context elicits more calculative and strategic thinking. Please pay attention. People tend to objectify lower status individuals. We've mentioned briefly about money and objectification. Another group of researchers wanted to learn more about this issue, and they report on conducting 165 experiments in 18 countries. And there are two major effects. See, 165 experiments in 18 countries, and there are two major effects. People reminded of money are less interpersonally attuned. They're less prosocial, caring, or warm. They eschew interdependence. People reminded of money shift interprofessional, business, and work mentality. They exert effort on challenging tasks, demonstrate good performance, and feel efficacious. These constituents breeding ground for objectifying tendencies, both in terms of increased perception of the relation as instrumental, objectification of the relation, and undermined perception of another person as a human being, objectification of another, especially when he or she considered as irrelevant for the goal achievement. Let's continue talking about objectification at work. People may be more likely to think calculatively and strategically in work contexts than in non-work contexts, for at least two reasons. First, they may believe that it is reasonable and appropriate to do so in such settings. There is a widespread attention that business is solely about profit and that business people should be self-interested, rational actors, constantly competing with one another in a rat race to the top. Indeed, when asked what is necessary to succeed in the workplace, people often emphasize that one must play office politics, engage in Machiavellian strategies, and be calculative and strategic about forming relationships. Second, these mindsets are consistently taught, reinforced, and even rewarded in many work contexts. Rational economic calculations often occupy a central place in organizational decision-making. Deliberative and calculative methods are usually used to solve financial, behavioral, strategic, and even ethical dilemmas. Calculative and strategic thinking usually elicits objectification. Social interactions in work contexts tend to follow market pricing model, which involves using cost-benefit analysis, valuing objects according to the prices at which they can be sold or bought, and viewing time as something that must be spent efficiently and effectively, more than those in non-work contexts. Very important. Objectification increases the emotional and cognitive distance between the objectifier and the target, who is no longer perceived as a social partner, but as a mere instrument useful for one's own purposes. Objectification weakens the felt empathy towards the objectified target and diverts the objectified attention from the target's desires or needs. As a consequence, these biased perceptions cognitively facilitate aggressive or unethical acts towards the target, which often includes more self-gain or competitive behaviors during interpersonal exchange. Of course, not all work contexts elicit calculative and strategic thinking to the same degree. And this is really is a great news. Some workplace organizations, strongly emphasize the importance of putting in place and their well-being first. However, this is quite rare. Many workplace organizations are motivated mostly by economic considerations. Another negative consequence of objectification at work is the following. See, people join companies not only to work, but also to fulfill their psychological needs. For example, build social relationships, feel respected, have autonomy. Objectification undermines all of this. Now let's say a few words about something which is very interesting and which is strongly related to what we are talking about. So let's say a few words about pro-self and pro-social orientation. Even the title of the names of what I've said right now, pro-self and pro-social orientation, actually it is self-explanatory. So you may guess what they are about, but let's say more about this. Daily, we are called as individuals or groups to make multiple decisions about whether to cooperate or compete with others. Opting for cooperation can help to address important collective challenges. Evolutionary research suggests that humans have evolved to live in a cooperative way because this increases collective prosperity. But nevertheless, there is no doubt that human beings can engage in competition or conflict with others. Thus, cooperation and competition, they are two opposite forces that seem to coexist in human nature. And social psychological research has empirically investigated this issue in the context of social decision-making by identifying pro-self and pro-social orientation as the two key motivations that influence individuals in behaving in a competitive or cooperative manner. Pro-self motivated individuals aim for maximizing their own profits and enact behaviors that neglect the possible outcomes achieved by other individuals involved. Instead, pro-social motivated individuals aim at for creating a fair exchange in which the ultimate goal is maximization of joint outcomes. Research shows that social motivations have a stable dispositional component. These orientations are often linked to, broader personality traits, socialization, life experiences, and these dispositional tendencies are relatively stable over time. Why are we talking about this? Because it has been demonstrated by research and practice that pro-self individuals are more inclined to frame the interaction in terms of power and strength, whereby pro-social individuals place special emphasis on fairness, equity, morality, and justice. It is interesting to note that social motives, pro-self and pro-social, actually are sensitive to contextual factors and situational cues, and in a sense can be somewhat manipulated. For example, if you frame an interaction labeling the other as a partner or opponent, this can temporarily activate pro-self or pro-social motivation. Similarly, situational factors such as expectations to interact with other opponent in the future or focus on shared group memberships can shift individuals' motivational posture, leading to more competitive or cooperative behavior depending on the context. What are the mechanisms underlying the impact of social motives on interpersonal behavior? Demonstrating, for example, the pro-self motivation associated with concern for equality and fairness and interpersonal trust, and pro-social motivation with concerned with equality, trust, and pro-self concerned with reaching personal goals. Expectations about the interaction partner were found to be affected by social motivation, with pro-self individuals expecting others to be consistently competitive. Furthermore, it was also demonstrated that they are more inclined to frame the interactions in terms of power and strength, whereas the pro-social individuals place emphasis on morality. Pro-self, but not pro-social motivation lead to increased objectification. Pro-social and pro-self individuals hold different expectations about their counterparts. Pro-self individuals expect others to be similarly oriented toward competition. This leads to more competitive postures, which in turn elicits competition in the counterpart and confirms the idea that everyone is motivated to compete. In contrast, pro-socials are characterized by variable expectations about the others and more willingness to adjust their behavior to the partner's moves. Thereby, pro-social individuals, more than pro-self ones, are committed to getting an understanding of the other inclinations and motivations. Pro-social motivated individuals are more prone to taking the perspective of the other person. Let's add more, let's start summarizing what we are saying so far. Objectification increases the emotional and cognitive distance between the objectifier and the target, who is no longer perceived as a social partner, but as a mere instrument useful for one's own purposes. Objectification weakens the felt empathy towards the objectified target and diverts the objectifier's attention from the target's desires or needs. As a consequence, these biased perceptions cognitively facilitate aggressive or unethical acts towards the target, which often includes more self-gain or competitive behaviors during interpersonal exchange. What is the practical application of the knowledge which we have discussed, which have been discussing today? See, powerful people tend to view others in terms of reaching their goal. So make sure that such a person sees you, your group, as important for reaching his or her goal. Then it will be significantly easier for you to cooperate with him or her on multiple occasions. Second, people can be primed. And priming is when you remind someone about the knowledge he or she has, and then the person is actually guided by this knowledge in his or her future actions. So prime a powerful person with a goal you want him or her to have. So she or he will evaluate others in terms of this goal. Then, to the extent that social ties are critical determinants of social and economic success, the ability to make oneself instrumental, especially to powerful individuals, might be a key avenue for upward mobility. So please pay attention to this. And then at the end of this lecture, you will find several practical tasks that you would need to solve. For example, in many hiring situations, employers search for job candidates with specific criteria in mind, which reflect the organizational goals that managers are responsible for implementing. Often, however, high-power top managers would insist on hiring a candidate with seemingly good job-specific skills, but with bad organization fit, character, culture fit qualities. For example, a top manager insisted on hiring a sales director who was known on the market as someone who could achieve sales targets, but who also stole from previous companies where he used to work. question to you. What can be done so that the top manager will not even think about suggesting hiring such individual? And there are several of such tasks for you to solve. This is what I wanted to share with you today. So, what is the goal for you, while you are listening this lecture? The goal for you is stop being a naive employee. The goal for you is to become a smart employee. The goal for you is not to view everyone who look sweet and friendly as really sweet and friendly. This person may quickly start using objectification. So you need to be ready for this. You need to know what to do with this. You need to understand the entire context well. So please pay attention to the knowledge in this lecture. It will really help you achieve your goal. And now I wish you to have a good day and goodbye.